Often I've heard people remark that Generation X is the last generation that remembers a world without the internet, a world before the damage caused by the baby boomers' diversity experiment and their complete embrace of indiscriminate tolerance had been felt. If you watch a movie from the 1980s, it's easy to see this cultural difference, and the further you go back, the more apparent those differences are. The sad reality is the younger millennials and Generation Z were robbed of this version of America. A version of America that baby boomers stomped to death, with protests of the vocal few and the silence of the majority. Not only were they robbed of this America, they don't even have the fading memories that Generation X has of what this America even felt like. I think it's important to take a look back at the now extinct culture, not only to see what was lost, but also to see the very sinister and first whispers of the ruling class and their greatest weapon against the descendants of the founders that wished to preserve this culture, the culture they had inherited, and the freedom that was their birthright, the weapon that would be used to undo the strength and the structure of the community and unravel every manifestation of decency, a weapon called Hollywood. You see, another thing that likely escapes younger millennials and Generation Z was the impact that Hollywood used to have, because there was no internet, no YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat. Most people didn't even have cable TV. The majority of Americans only had access to a handful of TV stations and whatever movies happened to be playing in the theater. So Hollywood's influence was profound and exponentially more powerful than it is today. In fact, the only reason we are finally exposing the evil that's been going on inside that town since its founding, the only reason it's being exposed now is that they no longer hold a monopoly on the culture. We are simply seeing the wreckage that has been accumulating over the decades from Hollywood's laying waste to our nation's soul. If we want to understand how the degeneracy started, we have to study the methods that they used to promote it, carefully and slowly, chipping away at the character of our people and subverting our social norms. The subtle, steady pace that moves so slowly it can only accurately be observed once so much time has passed that most of the damage has already been done. There's an old proverb that says if you want to boil a frog that you have to do it slowly, because if you turn up the heat too quickly, the frog will simply jump out of the pot. You have to increase the temperature so slowly the frog adapts to the heat, and by the time the water is boiling, it's too late for the frog to escape. This is what Hollywood did to our culture. They slowly but steadily desensitized the public, promoting the acceptance of more and more degeneracy. If they had released this film, for example, in theaters in 1950, everyone involved in the making of this film would probably have to genuinely fear for their lives, let alone worry about what the law would do. The public would have lynched them after the first showing, but instead, they slowly turned up the heat, and by having patience and cunning, after just a few years, they were able to wear the people down and desensitize them until finally we arrive at the degenerate behavior that has now become the norm. Not only has this been an assault on our culture, it's been an assault on our senses. We are so desensitized to the degeneracy, we don't even have the ability to detect it. Like a drug addict that has had to increase their dosage little by little just to feel normal. It's no wonder they decided to call it tolerance. And that's what it is after all, this tolerance. And what happens when you increase your tolerance to a drug? You have to increase the dosage. And now we are at a dosage that is well beyond lethal. But we are so desensitized, our tolerance is so high, most people don't perceive it at all. Millennials and Generation Z could be described as cultural crack babies, born with a steady stream and an addiction to the degeneracy consumed by their junky parents, addicted with no memory of what life was like before the drug was being administered. The only way for our culture to survive this is if these children can survive the withdrawal symptoms when they come. They must be the first generation to not only reject the drug, but to try to purge it from the system. We must become sober. No longer can we survive the amputations that the elites are performing on our bodies, both physically and metaphorically. The anesthetic of decadence must be cut off at the source, or we will all bleed out, while the ruling class continues to feast on our remnants, and then invites new guests to the table that they can subvert and devour once we are gone. For Blackpilled, I'm Devin Stack. If you like my content, make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you share the videos and click the little notification bell. Also, you can support me by going to patreon.com/blackpilled or donate to the crypto addresses in the description.